Imagine food prices soaring, famine spreading, and entire communities wondering if the end of the world had arrived. This isn't the plot of a post-apocalyptic movie. It really happened. In 1816, people across Europe and North America experienced what became known as the Year Without Summer, a year of darkness, hunger, and chaos, and the cause was an event that had happened thousands of kilometers away. A volcanic eruption so powerful that it changed the climate of the entire planet. This is the story of how one mountain altered human history. The story begins on the remote Indonesian island of Sumbawa. There stood Mount Tambora. For centuries, it appeared relatively quiet, but beneath the mountain, unimaginable pressure was building. On April 5, 1815, residents heard thunder-like explosions. Many believed enemy warships were attacking. What they were actually hearing was the mountain awakening. For several days, the activity intensified. Then, on April 10th, disaster struck. Tambora exploded with a force unlike anything witnessed in modern history. The eruption blasted massive amounts of ash, gas, and rock into the atmosphere. The sound was reportedly heard over 2,000 kilometers away. Entire villages vanished. Tsunamis crashed into nearby coastlines. Thousands died immediately. But the worst consequences were only beginning, because the eruption didn't just affect Indonesia. It affected the entire planet. Tambora ejected enormous quantities of sulfur dioxide into the upper atmosphere. There, these gases formed tiny particles that spread around the globe. Think of them as a gigantic sunshade surrounding the Earth. Sunlight that would normally warm the planet was reflected back into space. Global temperatures began to drop. At first, nobody understood what was happening. People simply noticed that the weather had become stranger and stranger. The year 1816 had arrived, but summer never truly came. Across North America, frost struck in June. Snow fell in New England during what should have been warm summer months. Farmers watched crops freeze overnight. Corn failed, wheat failed, vegetables failed. In Europe, relentless rain ruined harvests. Fields became mud, food supplies shrank, prices skyrocketed. Families struggled to survive. Riots erupted in some regions. Begging and starvation became increasingly common. The weather was so bizarre that many people believed divine punishment had arrived. Others feared that the world itself was changing. For ordinary people living through it, the science didn't matter. What mattered was that food was disappearing, and nobody knew when the nightmare would end. The crop failures triggered a chain reaction. Livestock died because feed became scarce. Food shortages spread across continents. Many families abandoned their homes in search of better conditions. Historians estimate that the broader consequences of Tambora's eruption contributed to widespread famine and disease affecting millions. Entire communities were reshaped. Migration patterns changed. Economic hardship deepened. A volcanic eruption in Indonesia had become a global catastrophe. And yet, amid all the suffering, something unexpected emerged: creativity. In the summer of 1816, a group of writers gathered near Lake Geneva in Switzerland. But the weather was dreadful. Cold, dark, wet. They spent much of their time indoors because the summer they expected never arrived. Among them was a young writer named Mary Shelley. One evening, the group challenged each other to create ghost stories. Inspired by the gloomy atmosphere and endless storms outside, Shelley began writing a tale about a scientist who creates light. That story became Frankenstein, one of the most influential novels ever written. A volcanic eruption on the other side of the world had indirectly helped shape modern horror literature. History is strange that way. For decades, people struggled to understand why 1816 had been so cold. The connection to Mount Tambora wasn't immediately obvious. Only much later did scientists piece together the evidence. Ice cores from polar regions preserved chemical traces of the eruption. Historical records matched climate data. The mystery was solved. A single volcanic event had altered global weather patterns for years. It became one of the most powerful demonstrations of how interconnected Earth's systems truly are. Today, we often think of human civilization as separate from nature, but the story of the Year Without Summer tells a different story. A mountain erupted. The sky darkened. Harvests failed. People migrated. Economies changed. Books were written. History shifted. All because of an event that most of the world never saw. The next time you look at a volcano, remember, sometimes the most powerful forces in history don't come from kings, armies, or governments. Sometimes they come from the Earth itself. And in 1816, the Earth reminded humanity just how powerful it can be.